Northwest Liberty News, picking the lock on the shackles of tyranny.
Machines are going to fail, and the system's going to fail.
The past is past, the future's now.
Don't look at me. I think these people are completely nuts.
Sometimes trouble just follows a man.
There is another organism on this planet that follows the same pattern. Do you know what it is? A virus.
Can't you stop your lips from flapping for 2 little minutes?
Because I'm white.
I'm a man. I'm sensitive. I need to feel loved. I need to be desired.
I'm rapidly becoming a big underground success in this town.
It's a question of methods. Everybody wants results, but nobody wants to do what they have to do to get them done.
And now, coming to you live from Kalispell, Montana, brought to you by Northwest Liberty News, it's Montana Gazette Radio with your host, James White. Okay, so I'm your host, James White. This is Montana Gazette Radio. Thanks so much for joining us here on this 5th day of February, 2021. We're coming to you live from a snowy Kalispell, Montana. And we are delighted to have with us again today, returning guest Gene Pringle, who's a tax expert. He's waiting on the line here right now, so we're going to actually admit him to the show here and bring him on. And Gene, are you there with us, Gene?
Yeah, I'm here.
Hi, Gene. Thanks for joining us here. You are live on the air. Gene has been a frequent guest on the program here. He's really basically a walking tax encyclopedia. He knows the ins and outs, and that is his area of expertise. He's been doing it for many, many years. And if you want to hear some of the previous interviews we have conducted with Gene, you can go on the Northwest Liberty News YouTube channel and type in Gene Pringle, and there'll be several of those videos that will come up, and you will get a college education on the tax system and what it really means and the definitions and how we've been really sort of bamboozled, I guess is the word I'd like to use, for quite a long time. But with that long-winded introduction, Gene Pringle, thanks so much for joining us here once again on the broadcast.
Hey, thanks, Jim. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another day in paradise.
Yeah, right on.
This morning, I'd like to talk to you about a really touchy subject, and that's IRS summonses to produce books, records, and information. There's a lot of misconstruction out there, and a lot of people get in trouble because, first of all, they don't understand their rights and the fact that the Constitution protects us against unreasonable administrative incursions into our personal affairs. So what I want to talk about today is how we deal with these IRS summonses to produce books and records that come in for an investigation or examination. They always tell you, we've chosen your tax return to examine. What are they going to examine? Think about this. The Supreme Court says that the information on a 1040 tax return is the testimony of a witness. So with that in mind, who has authority to change your testimony or browbeat you or coerce you into changing your testimony? Now, I'm not a lawyer or one of those fancy named individuals, but I do understand the Constitution and have studied it quite extensively. So the Fourth and Fifth Amendment prevents these types of incursion into our private affairs. And you presented testimony. Anyone who tries to change that testimony would be guilty of violating 18 U.S.C. 1512. Or state statutes that have the same protections. Many states have the coercion of a witness as a felony. Most have it as at least a Class A misdemeanor. So it's a serious crime. So what we want to do is, number one, do not respond to any IRS administrative summonses. You have to address the issue, but what you want to do is put the agent on notice that you're not going to tolerate them changing your testimony, especially if you submitted a return. If you haven't submitted a return and you're not engaged in a privileged activity like alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, why would you submit to an investigation by the IRS? Where's their authority at? So we really have to open our minds and our eyes and start thinking about what we're required to do by law. So let's take a look at this IRS summons. They always say Internal Revenue Service, the division is normally small business and self-employed, examinations. Okay? If you go to the delegation authority, delegation order authority, this is IRM 1.2.43. This is the delegation order or authority for examination process. And you go through that manual and you'll find in delegation order 4-41, formal written request for financial institution records where summons authority is not available. And it goes down and it talks delegated to directors, large business and international, small business, self-employed, tax-exempt and government entities, wage and investment and criminal investigations, territory managers, large and mid-sized businesses, small business, self-employed, wage and investment, area managers, small business, self-employed, tax-exempt government entities, and special agents in charge, criminal investigations. I don't see it delegated to a revenue agent. So there's one of the first problems that comes up. There's no other provision in that delegation order which gives anybody any summons authority.
Can I pause you for a second here, Gene? I think that what I would be thinking is, from sitting on the other end, they, what you state here and what you come on this show and that you put out, the truth that you put out, certainly you back it up with evidence. But doesn't it all come down to they have to recognize it? I mean, they have to. We've had, I've had people on here that the judges says you can't have the Constitution in this courtroom. I mean, doesn't it really come down to enforcement? I mean, we know that we know that this is all really kind of a scam in a sense. I mean, because you pointed out here every time you come on. But how do we stop it? That's the thing. I mean, they have all the guns, right, and all the agents.
Well, when the judge tells you that I don't want the Constitution in my courtroom, he's just admitted one huge thing. You are in an administrative court. What are you doing there? If you're not in a court of law under the Constitution, they don't have any jurisdiction over you. They haven't produced a contract that made you subject to an administrative court. We need to wake up. As American people, we have got to wake up and get out of the fog. We have rights. Our rights don't come from the Constitution. Our rights come from God Almighty. And this idea that some jerk can sit on a bench and call himself a judge and then tell you the Constitution doesn't apply in his courtroom doesn't need to be in this country. It needs to be in a prison somewhere. They're not judges. They're tyrants.
No argument for me. No argument.
This is when you go after that judge's bond or his oath of office, he's taking an oath to be that judge. He's taking an oath to support and defend the constitutions of the state that he's in and the United States of America. And him saying the Constitution doesn't apply there is treason to his oath of office. Look up treason under Title 18.
I'm looking it up here. I can't find the document that I had the other day that I posted it when I did a show the other day, Gene. It stated clearly in a Supreme Court ruling, I want to say it was 1946, it clearly stated that if any entity takes on the role of a corporation, it has no more power than any other corporation. And we know that the county's incorporated. We know that the city's incorporated. We know that the state's incorporated. It says it, Supreme Court ruling. I read it.
Exactly. So the question is, what capacity is a government interfering with your liberty. What capacity are they interfering under? Under the criminal code or under the administrative code?
Administrative
If
code.
it's administrative, first contract that created the liability. Are we getting close here now?
There isn't one. There's no
Understanding
contract.
the difference? In other words, if it's common law, there must be an injured party. If it's statutory, you have to have a contract or be engaged in some activity that connects you to the state. Can they claim that through a social security number? I've seen it done. I've done it in court. The prosecutor will pop say, well, he has a social security number. He used a public road to come here. He did this or he did that. Objection. I have a right to use the public highway. That's what they're built for. They're called public ways. And I don't have a social security number. If you look at the statute and the law, it will tell you that social security numbers belong to the Social Security Administration and must be surrendered upon demand. You cannot own a social security number. If you could own one, you could sell it on eBay. It would be your property, but it's not. You are only using the number for its intended purpose. Was its intended purpose to make slaves out of Americans? Was that the purpose of the Social Security Administrations when it was set up in 1935? I thought it was old age, disability, and retirement program. Isn't that what it's been sold at all these years?
Yeah, and it was never supposed to, when it first came around, it was promised that it would never be used as identification. Well, of course, you know now.
Okay, so the government breached its contract. That voids the contract. Happy days. Nobody's required to have a social security number to live and work in this country. You simply don't need one. And they can't compel you to get one. Are we free people or slaves? We got to wake up. Let's get back to the summons issue, because this is important.
We're waking up.
We've got to stop. We have to stop giving the government authority over us. So look at the summons. They say, you are hereby summoned and required to appear before RAs or blah, 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 some revenue agent, right? Or their delegates. An officer of the Internal Revenue Service to give testimony and to bring with you and produce for examination the following books, records, papers, and other related to the tax liability or the collection of the tax liability, or for the purpose of inquiring into any offense connected with the administration or enforcement of the internal revenue laws concerning the person identified above for the period shown. When you start to realize that what they're asking you to do is incriminate yourself, we're protected from that kind of draconian garbage by the Fifth Amendment. So I want to go through a couple of cases that went through the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. And this was Robert L. Schultz, pro se. He was from Queensbury, New York, and he went against the IRS, Agent Anthony Roundtree from the Internal Revenue Service. And what he did is he went in, he got into IRS summons, and he did a motion to quash the summons, which is standard procedure. What the court said was that Schultz's petition to quash the summons was premature because he had not suffered any injury. Now think about that, folks. Isn't that a common law rule? Before we can be punished, don't we have to injure someone or somebody's property? Listen to what the court said. It is well established that Article 3 of the Constitution confines the jurisdiction of the federal courts to actual cases and controversies, citing Clinton versus City of New York, 524 U.S. 417, to demonstrate the standing necessary to invoke the jurisdiction of the federal courts. Schultz must allege personal injury fairly traceable to the defendant's allegedly unlawful conduct and likely to be redressed by the requested relief, citing Allison versus Wright, 468 U.S. 737. This injury may not be speculative or abstract, but must be distinct and definite. Now, you don't need to have an attorney tell you what that means. If you do, go back to school.
Well, what that means, Gene, is if I run a stop sign, I don't harm anybody. There's no victim. I've not victimized. I haven't harmed anybody's property. I haven't ran over anybody's fence. You know, if you just run a stop sign and they pull you over and you get a $75 ticket, who have you made whole by paying that?
You haven't. There's no injury, but what you're doing, they're alleging that you're driving. We're getting off by doing these, by jumping off the subject here. We're getting away from the topic.
Go ahead, Gene.
We could do this all day long and spend hours, but we're losing sight of the thing here. At common law, there must be an injury of some sort before we can be punished. Traffic and driving, it's a whole different subject, and I don't want to get involved in that right now, but let's stay the course on the summons so we can get this explained so people can understand not to talk to these people. You don't have to. Use a letter. We're going to have letters available through our website at uncommonconsultant.org very shortly. I have already dealt with 2 revenue agents who sent administrative summonses. I did not respond to either one. I sent letters to my banks that I deal with and told them not to respond either. If they do, and I'm harmed by that information, I will seek redress against the bank. And I can tell you, let their attorneys mull that over for a while. So anyway, getting back to the Schultz cases, these 2 cases are extremely important to read and understand because they tell you flat out that no one can be punished for disobeying an IRS summons or request for documents and records until that summons is supported by a federal court order. I want you to take that to the bank. Write it down. Remember it. If you get a summons or a request for an examination in the mail and it's not supported by a federal court order, toss it in the garbage can. But don't produce any information. Don't talk to anybody over the phone. The IRS calls you, tell them simply, please put your concerns in writing and mail it to me at my mailing location and give them your post office box address or whatever you have. Make them put it in writing under seal and signature. In other words, if they want to do something, make them sign for it. So this is what the court said. Only a refusal to comply with an order of the district judge subjects the witness to contempt proceedings. So they can't charge you with contempt if you don't answer an IRS summons or request for an investigation or an examination. It's baloney. So they like to throw a bunch of garbage at you and tell you, oh, you have to respond. You have to respond. Oh, no, you don't. So the case that I'm reading from is 395 Fed 3rd 463 in 2005. This is Robert L. Schultz versus Internal Revenue Service and Anthony Roundtree. Now, the IRS appealed. The government always appeals these decisions because they don't like them. So they appealed. So we go to the next case, which they call, that's Schultz 1, and this we're going to go to the next one, which is Schultz 2. Under Schultz 2, which is 413 Fed 3rd 297, the court again, in the Second Circuit, they did a rehearing. And what they said, having considered the arguments of the parties, we grant the petition to rehear for only the limited purpose and to the extent necessary to clarify our prior opinion and hold that 1, absent an effort to seek enforcement through a federal court, IRS summonses to appear to testify or produce books, records, papers, and other data, 26 U.S.C. 7604, issued under the Internal Revenue Laws, ID, apply, no force to the target, and no punitive consequences can befall a summoned party who refuses, ignores, or otherwise does not comply with an IRS summons until that summons is backed by a federal court order. Number 2, if the IRS seeks enforcement of a summons through the federal courts, those subject to the proposed order must be given a reasonable opportunity to contest the government's request. In other words, you get to go to court and ask them what they want the summons for. And I would be asking them for that plain statement of the basis of law and factual situation that gave rise to the deficiency. Number 1, show me the law that makes me liable for the tax that you're trying to collect. If you can't produce that statute and regulation, go pound sand in a rat hole. I ain't giving you nothing. Do you get it? If a federal court grants a government's request for an order of enforcement, then any individual subject to that order must be given a reasonable opportunity to comply and cannot be held in contempt or subject to indictment under 76 or 26 U.S.C. 7210 for refusing to comply with the original unenforced IRS summons, no matter the taxpayer's reasons or lack of reason for so refusing. My God. They ought to teach this stuff in second grade. I'm sure a second grader could comprehend the word no. If they don't, the parents didn't do the right job in the beginning.
Well, I have to say, pound sand in a rat hole, it's the first time I think that phrase has been used on the broadcast in the years that I've been on the show. So I got to say, you made your mark there.
Well, I want you to understand it's a useless endeavor because it's not going to do you any good.
That is funny. That's a funny one. I may use that one. So what they've done really, Gene, is they have used color of law to try to force people and coerce them into complying with taxes that they don't have really the right to even charge us or place upon us. Now, if we you talked about your website, and let's give you a chance to give that out. uncommonconsultants.org, uncommonconsultants.org. You mentioned some letters. What kind of stuff can people find, Gene, when they go on uncommonconsultants.org?
Well, we don't have our letters up there just yet that we're working on. So if you keep checking the website, they will be up very shortly because we have to get all of the codes entered in for putting them up there because each one is different. So it's not the easy thing to do, but we have the web people are working on it. But they will be available. And these are letters to respond to an IRS summons. Letters in response to a notice of federal tax lien. How can they send you a notice of federal tax lien if they can't even produce a statute that makes you liable? How do they do this stuff?
Well,
they claim that, you're working for wages. Wages are income. No, the wages of sin are death, right? So let's go back to what wages are. Go back to the Internal Revenue Code. Where is the term wages defined? Is it defined in Section 1? No, it's not there. Section 1 imposes an income tax on taxable income, not on any individual. Those headings in the next paragraph, husbands and wives or married individuals filing jointly or, whatever, that doesn't mean nothing as to what is taxed or who is taxed. That's just those individuals, they receive taxable income. But what's taxable income? The Supreme Court says income is profit or gain derived from some source. Go back to the 16th Amendment. This is what we're all talking about. Do you realize that the 16th Amendment has not been amended since it was enacted in 1913? The word income that's used in that amendment has not changed. It still means profit or gain. Do you receive profit or gain from the exercise of your labor? Don't you spend your time of life? Are you ever going to get it back? Can you go to the bank and get it refunded? Can you go to God and say, can I have those last 8 hours I worked? Can I do that over again and go back and redo it? Change what you did? No, you cannot. It's history. It's gone. It's final. You can write it in a book. It stays the same forever. You cannot undo it. So what you did was you spent your time of life. That's an exchange. Your labor is your God-given property, and that's your most sacred property, and it's inviolable. And it's not taxable, either by the state or the federal government. We have a lot of people out here who think otherwise, and they like to blow smoke, but they can't prove it. Ask your state revenue department for a list of the sources of income in your state. They'll come up and tell you compensation for labor. Thank you very much. That's a source of income, but it's not the income derived from the source. Now, I'll give you an interesting little statute here. You can go and search this out and look it up and read it and study it and understand it. This is called the Federal Debt Collection Procedures Act. It's located in 28 U.S.C. 3001 to about 310 or 310. I think it's 3106 is what it is. 3106. Anyway, look that up at 3002 number 6 and read the definition of earnings. This is where you'll find the interesting things. Go to garnishment laws in your state and read the garnishment laws. If they get a garnishment order against you, where do they have to get it at? They have to go to a court and get an order of garnishment. If they don't go to court and get a garnishment order, and some attorney signs a garnishment of your wages, and you look up the term wages and find out wages are only paid for employment, and employment is defined as within the United States or aboard an American vessel or aircraft. Let's see, if we're in the 50 states of the American Union, are we in the District of Columbia? No, we're not. The United States is located in the District of Columbia. Look at your Uniform Commercial Code in every state. It tells you the United States is located in the District of Columbia. It's the seat of government of the United States of America. It is not a country. So when you look at the terms in the Internal Revenue Code and get it figured out that for the most part it's territorial code. It applies to the District of Columbia and the territories, Guam, Puerto Rico, American Samoa, and the Virgin Islands. So what are they doing out here in states of the Union? Oh, well, the states entered into agreements. You might want to do a FOIA request or a public records law demand to get your state's agreement with the Internal Revenue Service to collect their state income tax. Can a state income tax be defined different than a federal tax? We have one country here. It's called the United States of America. Words are defined. They have meanings. Those meanings cannot be altered from one county to the other, or one state to another, or one jurisdiction to another. They have to have the same meanings in law. Otherwise, we don't have law.
Gene, hold that thought. We're going to take a quick break, but we're at the bottom of the hour here. We're going to take a quick commercial break. Before we do, though, one more time, it is uncommonconsultants.org. uncommonconsultants.org. Is there a way to contact you through there, Gene? Is there a contact button, or there's an?
Yes, you can contact. There's contact information there.
Okay, excellent. So it sounds like that's where you can find all the information you need there, folks, at uncommonconsultant.org. If you want to send a message to Gene Pringle with some tax questions or some of the letters, even though they're not published on the website, I'm sure they're probably still available. If people that reach out to you, you can still make them available to them.
As people reach out that have a problem with the summons or something like this, investigation or examination, and they want help with it, by all means, reach out, contact me through the website, and I'll get back to you as rapidly as possible and set you on the right path.
All right, very good, Gene. We're going to go ahead and put your phone on mute here real quick and run these commercials. We'll be back after these brief messages here with tax expert Gene Pringle on Montana Gazette Radio. If you want to support us, you can go to montanagazetteradio.com, montanagazetteradio.com, or montanadailygazette.com, or, of course, the flagship northwestlibertynews.com. Thanks so much for looking in today here. We'll be back after these brief messages on the broadcast. If you like classic cars, exceptional service, and a money-back guarantee, then the Corner Shop in beautiful downtown Kalispell is the place for you. Whether it's an oil change, engine diagnostic, suspension work, or brakes all around, the Corner Shop has you covered. With expert technicians and a free consultation on all services, you can't go wrong with the Corner Shop. Did I mention the classic cars? While you're waiting for your expert service to be performed, take a stroll through the showroom to see Kalispell's smoothest collection of classic cars. The Corner Shop is conveniently located at 1212 South Main, just south of the courthouse. The Corner Shop is open Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. till 5 p.m., so drop by for an appointment or call 755-7777. That's 755-7777. The Corner Shop, Kalispell's full-service auto repair facility. Hi, this video is brought to you by PatriotPrepared.com, where right now you can save $250 on each large package purchase, plus get free shipping to the continental United States. In these troubled times, it's not a bad idea to have some extra food storage available, and you can save big at Patriot Prepared right now. Go to PatriotPrepared.com, that's PatriotPrepared.com, and use the code TRUMP250 at checkout to receive your savings today. Yes, folks, if you want to support this broadcast, please support our sponsors. They're spinning across the bottom of the screen there. If you have storable food needs or water purification needs, that type of stuff, seeds, you can go to PatriotPrepared.com. That's PatriotPrepared.com, and all of the purchases you make on PatriotPrepared.com go to directly support this broadcast. Okay, we have Gene Pringle is still on the line with us here. We're going to unmute Gene's phone and bring him back on the line. There we go. Gene Pringle is joining us here this morning. There he is. Gene, thanks so much for holding on with us after the break, my friend. We appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks, Ed. Thanks for having me on. I hope people are getting an earful here this morning.
Well, yeah, that's what we need to do,
it's
Gene.
high time.
Education.
It's high time we started waking up.
Yeah, well, people are waking up. People, I think, are seeing, if we look at, the current Biden, who's right now, he's put out 40-something executive orders and trying to operate like a dictator. And, you see the pipeline things going on there. And, it's just, we can see the tyranny. It's out in the open now, Gene. I think that is waking people up. A lot more people I notice are talking more about and to tell you, the big topic right now is the United States Incorporated, like the corporations, how all that came about. That has been a really, really big topic of discussion, a really hot topic. So, that's coming from people that I never really suspected that we'd be talking about that stuff. So I think there is sort of.
Well, and what we're talking about here today is on that same line.
Right.
The IRS as a federal agency, it does not have jurisdiction over the whole country. Its jurisdiction is limited to the District of Columbia and the territories. This is all going to come out. It's all going to come out in spades, and the government's going to have to, not our government, but that corporate government is going to have to pay through the nose. It's about time.
Well, have you heard, Gina, I know you keep your finger on this type of stuff. We've been hearing here on this broadcast and people that we know that the corporation has been dissolved. It's been bankrupt. We're going to be moving forward with a new republic. And have you heard anything about any of that stuff, Gene? Have you heard any of that through any of the contacts that you have or any of the places that you go?
Well, I go by the old adage, believe half what you see and none of what you hear. So until I see something I'm not going to jump to any conclusions, but I do know that the corporation United States was disbanded. It's gone, so it's no longer in existence. You can find that on the web. If you go and look for it on the web, you'll also find that some of these others are fast dropping by the wayside. These states all incorporated their governments. They're all sub corporations of the federal corporation. So if the federal corporation dies, what are they? Keep in mind, every government wears two hats. It wears a corporate hat where it's dealing in private contracts, and then it wears a political hat where it deals with we the people. Those two jurisdictions are separate and cannot be combined. When I enter into a contract with the government, I waive certain of my rights to enter into that contract with the government. But if I don't have a contract with the government, I've waived no right. So this is the same with these administrative summonses and stuff that the IRS issues. They're administrative summonses. They're not court-ordered summonses. And until they're backed by a federal court order, they're unenforceable. I don't care what these people do. They can jump up and down, scream and holler. It doesn't make any difference. It doesn't enforce that summons. What we have to do is stop volunteering. They want you to voluntarily come in and incriminate yourself. So if the testimony on your 1040 tax return or your state return is the testimony of a witness, who has authority to change that? If some revenue agent, it's state or federal, calls you up on a phone or sends you a letter and says, we disagree with your testimony, and doesn't put in some kind of testimony to countermand that testimony, what is that doing? Isn't that interfering with a witness? Isn't that attempting to coerce you to change your testimony? In Oregon, coercion is a Class C felony. These people do it. Judges do it in court. Attorneys do it in court. They laugh at you because you say, oh, well, I have a fundamental right to exist and earn a living. And they, oh, that's really funny. Your wages are income. Okay, that statement is a false and fraudulent statement. If a judge makes that, a judge is making a false and fraudulent statement. If they want to disagree, my name is Eugene Dayton Pringle, Jr. Contact me. I'll be happy to prove it to you. It's pretty simple. Go to the term wages at 3121A in the Internal Revenue Code and read the definition. And it tells you right there that wages are paid for employment. What's the word employment mean? It's defined in 3121B. And if you're engaged in employment, you fall under Part 31 of the regulations, which are called employment taxes. Go read those. Start out with 31.3121A. When you get over to wages paid after 1954, look at the terms within the United States or outside the United States, and the definition of United States at 3121E. And I'll ask you a question. Under the term state, why did Alaska and Hawaii cease to be states in 1959? What happened to them? Did they vaporize? They gone? They fall off the planet? Where did they go? What is statehood? How did they get it? And if they're no longer subject to the Internal Revenue Code after they acquired statehood, why are they paying income taxes in Alaska and Hawaii? Why are they paying income taxes in California or Oregon or Washington or New York or Florida? If those states are no longer states of the United States, they are now states of the American Union. Why are they paying income taxes? It's because you're being subjected to a huge fraud.
It's a fraud,
So,
all right.
I want to go back quickly to Schultz 2, because this is very important for people to understand and look at what they did under Schultz, and there's no excuse for these judges not knowing the truth. So the court here, in discussing Schultz 1, the focus of that opinion was whether issuance of an IRS summons presents a case or controversy under Article 3 of the United States Constitution. Gee, remember that rag that you can't drag into the courthouse? ID at 464. So relying on the Supreme Court's decisions in Reisman versus Kaplan, and United States versus Biscalea, and our views of our decisions and application of Colton, and in United States versus Kuklakundis, we held that a taxpayer's motion to quash an IRS summons in the absence of an effort of the agency, by the agency to seek enforcement of that summons in a federal court does not present an Article 3 case or controversy. Because that holding entailed overruling in part our prior holding in Colton, we circulated Schultz 1 to all active members of the court prior to filing, ID'd at note 1. What's all active members of the court? We're talking about the circuit courts of the Union. So it was circulated to all of the circuits courts in the Union. All the judges in all those courts have prior notice. So these cases are extremely important because they're talking about the Supreme Court overruling in part a previous case. So what they said and what they held here was that these administrative summonses, this is the key here. So the government's principal concerns are that we misunderstood the nature of the jurisdictional bar on motions to quash IRS summonses and misapprehended the consequences that ensue from the issuance of an IRS administrative summons. As to the latter point, the government appears to argue alternatively or in combination that the government may use the federal courts to punish taxpayers who disobey an IRS summons, even if that summons is never enforced by a court order. Or if the summons is enforced by a court order, the court may punish disobedience of the IRS summons before providing the taxpayer an opportunity to comply with the court's order. If an IRS summons is enforced by a court order, the court may punish disobedience of that IRS summons, even if the taxpayer complies with the court's order. Okay? So this is what the government wanted to do. They wanted to punish people for not obeying an IRS summons. The court said, we are not unmindful of the potentialities of delay inherent in such an extra round. Potentialities, sufficient serious without one, as illustrated, for example, by Penfield of California versus SEC, but the government seems to be a victim of its own draconianism. We hold the district court had jurisdiction of the motions and thus reached the question of our appellate jurisdiction to review its denial. Our view of the constitutional issues implicated in these sections of the tax enforcement scheme and the conflicts posed by the government's draconianism is the same now as it was then. Reading 26 U.S.C. 7210 or 7604 to allow the imposition of penal consequences for failure to comply with an IRS summons renders the sections unconstitutional unless the summoned taxpayer has an opportunity to seek judicial review of the summonses before placing the taxpayer at risk of punishment. Understand that statement, folks. Use the power that we have as citizens of this country and stop this draconian government from intruding on our protected liberty. It's time. It's been past time. We have rights secured to us by God, not by government. Government's duty
Are you there, Gene?
property of the people.
Okay, Gene, can you
not figure out ways to trample our rights and steal our property. And that's what they're doing.
So I found this. I think there was a little bit of a delay there. The phone broke up just a minute. I found that I was looking for that document I told you about, and right here under the Clearfield Doctrine derived from the 1943 Supreme Court decision in Clearfield Trust et al. Versus the United States, 328 U.S. 363 and 318. The court ruled, in essence, that by making itself a corporation, the state becomes merely another corporation, having no more or less standing than that to which a government reduces all other corporations. So what's that mean? What that means is, once the states become incorporated, Gene, that's another layer of them their inability to control us, because it's like they become like McDonald's Corporation or Walmart. Walmart can't levy fines and taxes against us, against our earnings. They can't do that. I mean, that whole Supreme Court decision right there alone negates their whole existence if they're corporations.
Exactly. Okay, so they're acting, and this is a question that you would want to present in court. You want a clarification. So you do a motion to clarify. Is the government acting in its corporate capacity or in its political capacity? I need to know, because I need to know how to address the situation. How can you defend against a charge if you don't know what you're defending against?
Well, I'm trying to bring
up. If it's a tax matter, you want somebody to stand up and say, under penalty of perjury, I allege that you received taxable income from this source over here, and you failed to report that because you received over the exemption amount in income. Have you ever seen an IRS agent sign an affidavit of the source of the income that you received? No. You're never going to find one. Number one, they know better, because now they've made a statement. They've entered testimony in the record that you can countermand. If you're not involved in some regulated activity, some privileged employment like working for the government, or some regulated activity like alcohol, tobacco, or firearms, the government has no right to tax what you earn. Those are called earnings, not income. Look at the definition of words and realize these things. If your earnings are protected, they can't even garnish your earnings under the federal government's code. So if you really open your eyes and look at this and see the difference, what it says here, you'll understand that earnings is a fundamental God-given right, and it's protected. Income is a privilege. Income taxes have always been associated as privilege taxes. If you're not engaged in privileged activity and is operating a business a privileged activity, we have a right to be in business. Under the color of this COVID, the federal government and the state governments have decimated the middle class. That's what they've done here. The middle class are the people who have private businesses. They're ones that are in business. They're the job creators. Small businesses create more jobs than big businesses. Sounds kind of quacky, but it's true, because there's more small businesses than there are large businesses. The little mom and pop places that employ 3 or 4 people, or maybe 1 or 2, maybe a dozen, but they're small companies. You got to ask, why are they withholding taxes from the pay of their people that are working for them? Because they call them wage earners? Their wages are not taxable. That's their earnings. They're not engaged in a privileged occupation. They have a fundamental right to exist. You know, the Constitution requires frequent returns to fundamental principles. If we keep getting led astray down these roads of all this draconian government, more government agencies want more control over the lives of the people when they're not supposed to have any. We're the controller of the government, but we've been letting it run rampant. It needs to be shut down, reduced down, sized down. The more taxes you pay, the more big government you're going to get. Right now, the government's going rampant. They're hiring people like it's going out of style. They want to spend money, throw money at everything that they can think of throwing it at and give it away to everybody they can give it to so they can come at you and say you owe more in taxes.
Well,
I don't know, nothing.
Practically speaking, Gene, we're coming up here on tax season right now, actually. What would you suggest if it were you? This isn't we're not, not giving tax advice. You do what you do. But if it was up to you, Gene, if it were you and you have a tax bill, would you write them a letter or would you write them a check? What if you were the people that are listening on the broadcast right now that have tax burdens?
If it were me and I knew that I was being hornswoggled, I would first be trying to find out what kind of a return I should file to close out my requirement. That's the first thing. The second thing is, once you realize that you're not receiving any income from a source, I would draft up a letter that I would use, and I would send it to the Internal Revenue Service and the Secretary of the Treasury and inform them that I'm not receiving any income or have not received any income from any taxable source covered in the Internal Revenue Code or regulations for the last 3 years, and I might want to file amended returns to correct those erroneous returns that were filed before in order to claim back the money I gave to the government that didn't belong to the government. It belonged to me. It was mine. And I'm entitled to a refund because the government cannot keep money it's not entitled to. I don't care what they call it. It's a sum. It's an amount of money that they're not entitled to have. And they obtained it illegally by defrauding the American people. If you want to read the truth about that, go to the 1942 Victory Tax Act and read through that act and go to Part 2, Section 465. And once you read that, and it tells you that working for another non-resident alien individual, foreign partnership, or a foreign corporation outside the United States is not considered a trade or business in the United States, you don't receive taxable income from it. You'll also find the same language throughout the employment taxes. If you're working for a company other than the United States or an agency of, your wages are not taxable. They're exempt. They're accepted. They're eliminated. But that's not what the people are telling you. They're out here making money by filing tax returns. These people who claim to be experts in the field, they're experts at one thing, defrauding you of your money.
Well, and what it comes down to, Gene, is what it comes down to in a lot of these cases is we volunteer to do that. We volunteer to do it. We may not understand that we're volunteering to do it at the time because that's not made apparent to us. But I think that, when you, like we've talked about it before, fill out your tax form, sign the form, get into the club, people don't realize the type of burden that you've placed upon yourself unknowingly for the rest of your life and then wanting to take a third of your wages. All this has to be exposed and come to an end.
Yeah, and you've voluntarily placed yourself in that position because you filed a return. Once you file the returns, you can't stop until you show the government that you're not required to file. And that's basically what I help people do. I show them that I'm not required to file. I don't do tax returns. I don't fill out tax returns. I'm not licensed to do that. You have to be approved by the IRS or have some credential to fill out a tax return. But you can certainly fill it out yourself.
Well, Gene, we're just coming to the end of the show here. We want to give people a chance to reach out to you again through your website, uncommonconsultant.org, uncommonconsultant.org. Go over there and check out what Gene's got going on. He's going to have some of these letters up there pretty soon. He'll have them up there ready to go. Gene, do you have anything coming up? I know that you do some engagements outside of your your state, and I don't know how far away you go from where you're at, but do you have any anything coming up, any conferences coming up, or any presentations coming up that you want to let the folks know about? Are you going on the road, or are you just going to hang tight because it's winter, because it's snowy?
Well, right now we're kind of hanging tight until this COVID scare gets over with. It's a big bunch of cockamamie, but you know, it goes to show you that people will volunteer to do anything, even if get misinformation or conflicting information. And this whole thing from the beginning has been no more deadly than the seasonal flu, but they blow it out of proportion. Do you notice that everybody dies of COVID? What happened to stroke, cancer, all these other diseases we had going in our country before? All the deaths reported now are just COVID deaths.
COVID cured them all.
Why?
COVID cured it all.
Yeah, well, COVID cured cancer, heart disease. All of those things are gone. Now everybody dies of COVID. It's a way to scare people into complying with draconian laws.
Yep. Trauma-based mind control.
In the beginning, Dr. Fauci himself came out and said wearing a face mask does not protect you from the virus. But yet you see people run around here driving their car down the road wearing a stupid face mask. Why?
Gene, I've seen up to...
Who are they protecting?
Four.
They're endangering themselves. They are breathing in what they're breathing out. Well, if you get a germ in your mask, you get a virus in there in your mask, and you keep breathing through it, eventually you're going to suck it into your lungs. Take your mask off and breathe the fresh air. Best thing for you.
Now they want 4 masks, Gene. 4. I've heard the recommendation to wear 4 masks.
Oh,
now.
It's getting more stupid by the day. People need to wake up and tell the government to either prove your contention that a mask is beneficial or take your mask and stick them.
And we'll leave it at that. Gene Pringle, thanks so much for joining us here on the broadcast. As always, a great, lively discussion. We so much appreciate all the wealth of information that you have. Again, uncommonconsultant.org, uncommonconsultant.org. You can check out everything Gene's got going on. Gene, always great to talk to you, my friend. Thanks so much for being on the broadcast with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jim.
You're welcome. Talk to you soon. Bye now.
All right, bye.
Okay, there goes the very spirited Gene Pringle. You have him on the show today. We appreciate him so very much and all his information. Again, support his work by going to uncommonconsultants.org, and support this show by going to MontanaGazetteRadio.com, MontanaDailyGazette.com, or of course the flagship northwestlibertynews.com. You can click on the support independent news button there, become a Patreon on Patreon. We appreciate that. And we do appreciate you looking in here today. We're going to be back at 12 noon with a roundtable with Dave and Kelly and Jason. So tune into that if you'd like. Until then, this is James White for Montana Gazette Radio saying bye now.